16 million men alive today share a secret they do not know. They live on different continents, speak different languages, and follow different beliefs. Yet deep inside their DNA, they carry the same genetic scar. Modern genetic studies discovered it hidden within the Y-chromosome, a pattern so unusual that it appears again and again across enormous regions of Asia. Scientists first thought it might be a coincidence, but the numbers refused to behave like a coincidence. The marker traces back to a single male lineage that lived roughly 800 years ago. One man whose descendants spread across half the world. In scientific language, it is simply a genetic signature. In historical terms, it is something darker. The biological echo of conquest. To understand what that really means, we must step away from modern laboratories and travel into a far more brutal world. The year is 1220. Dust settles slowly over the ruined city of The air smells of smoke, shattered brick, and dried blood. Houses lie broken like bones beneath the open sky. Among the debris stands a young girl named Saria. She is barely 15 years old. She watches in silence as soldiers wearing hardened leather armor drag her mother toward a wagon covered in black cloth. The wheels crush broken stones as the wagon moves through the destroyed streets. Around her, thousands of women cry out in terror while Mongol soldiers move with disciplined efficiency through the ruins. Saria does not yet understand that the life she knew has already ended. Her name, her home, her identity, none of it exists anymore. To the Mongol official observing the scene from horseback, she is not a daughter or a citizen. He holds a brush and a scroll, calmly writing notes as if recording trade goods arriving at a marketplace. Saria is simply an entry in a military ledger. Her age is written down. Her physical condition is assessed. Even the width of her hips is examined with the same clinical detachment a merchant might use when evaluating livestock. What is about to happen to her is not random cruelty. It is part of a system. What the Mongol Empire was building at that moment was something history rarely describes clearly. It was not just conquest. It was demographic engineering on a massive scale. Genghis Khan did not merely want the lands of his enemies. He wanted their future. He wanted the bloodlines of conquered civilizations to disappear over time, replaced slowly but permanently by his own. For him, reproduction itself could become a weapon of empire. To understand how such an idea could even exist, we must travel further back in time, far away from burning cities to the windswept plains of Mongolia in the year 1162. The steppe is a harsh world. The sky stretches endlessly in every direction, and survival is never guaranteed. Inside a felt tent shaking beneath the cold wind, a boy is born. His name is Temujin. Later history will remember him as Genghis Khan. According to legend, the child was born clutching a dark clot of blood in his tiny fist. Mongolian shamans interpreted the omen as a sign that the boy would grow into a great warrior. But destiny did not grant him power. Instead, the world taught him cruelty through suffering. When Temujin was only 9 years old, his father, the leader of their clan, was poisoned by a rival tribe. In many cultures, the son of a chief would inherit protection and status, but the logic of the steppe was merciless. A widow and her children were seen as useless burdens. Temujin's own clan abandoned his family, leaving them to survive alone in the wilderness. The years that followed were not a childhood. They were a struggle against extinction. Temujin searched frozen ground for edible roots. He hunted rodents to keep his family alive. Sometimes he fought his own brothers over scraps of food. Those harsh years shaped his worldview with brutal clarity. He learned that survival belonged only to those strong enough to take it. Compassion had no place in the unforgiving logic of the steppe. But the event that truly changed the course of his thinking occurred when he was 16 years old. Temujin's young wife, Bert, was kidnapped during a raid by the Merkit tribe. To Temujin, the attack was more than a personal insult. It was the theft of his family, his honor, and his future. Consumed by rage, he gathered allies and organized a rescue. Months later, he succeeded in recovering her. Yet when Bert returned, she was pregnant. The child, later known as Joki, would forever carry uncertainty about his true father. For many men of that time, such a situation would have been unbearable humiliation. But Temujin did not react with shame. Instead, he saw something else entirely. Watching his wife's growing belly, he realized something terrifyingly simple. His enemies had not only attacked his family, they had attempted to plant their bloodline inside his household. In that moment, a strategic insight formed in his mind. Men die noir. Their bodies decay and their weapons rust. But women survive. Through them, the blood of conquerors can flow into future generations. Cities can be rebuilt. Land can change hands again and again. But once bloodlines mix, the change is permanent. Whoever controls reproduction ultimately controls the future. This realization changed everything. What had begun as personal anger became a long-term strategy. If reproduction itself could be controlled, then conquest could extend far beyond the battlefield. It could reshape entire populations over generations. When Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan in 1206, uniting the Mongol tribes under his rule, this idea was no longer simply a thought. It became policy. The Mongol Empire would not only conquer territories, it would reshape the biological future of the regions it dominated. And soon, the world would discover that this vision was not merely theoretical. It would be implemented with terrifying efficiency. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the hidden corners of history. See you next time, when a young warrior named Temujin united the scattered Mongol tribes in 1206 and was proclaimed Genghis Khan. A revolutionary idea he had nurtured since his youth became official imperial strategy. Conquest was no longer just about seizing territory or plundering wealth. It was about something far more permanent, something irreversible. Cities could be rebuilt, kingdoms could rise from the ashes, but bloodlines, once altered, could never truly be the same again. This profound insight was about to be weaponized, transformed into a system as organized, efficient, and ruthless as the Mongol military machine itself. The first major test of this strategy unfolded in 1209 during the Mongol campaigns against the Tangoed kingdom of Western Xia. When the Mongol hordes appeared on the horizon, ready to encircle a fortified city, they didn't just bring their legendary cavalry and powerful siege engines. Riding alongside the generals were administrators, scribes, and officials, their hands not on swords, but on ink, brushes, and scrolls. Their battle wasn't fought on the walls. It began only after the city had fallen. Once a city was breached and its defenses shattered, the fate of its people followed a disturbingly structured pattern. For the men, the outcome was grim and predictable. Mass execution, or enslavement for hard labor until death. But for the women, something entirely different was planned. This wasn't the chaotic, indiscriminate looting and violence typical of ancient warfare. Instead, the Mongols treated female captives as a strategic resource, one to be carefully inventoried, classified, and distributed according to a cold, calculated logic. Historical records from Persian and Chinese chroniclers paint a clear and chilling picture of how methodical this process was. After a city's capture, women were herded into central squares or open fields outside the city walls. They were stripped of their jewelry, their personal possessions confiscated. Often, they were forced to remove their clothing, allowing for an unobstructed inspection. Mongol officials would then walk slowly down the lines of terrified captives, evaluating each woman with the detached, clinical focus of a merchant selecting livestock. The system was based on a brutal hierarchy of perceived value. Young women in their peak reproductive years were considered the ultimate prize. Those who were physically unharmed and possessed features the Mongols found desirable were set aside, reserved for the imperial elite. Many of these women would be forced to travel thousands of kilometers, destined for the courts of powerful Mongol rulers, or given as prestigious rewards to high-ranking generals and loyal commanders. Their role was to bear the children of the new ruling class, seeding the conquered lands with Mongol blood. A second category was established for women who had already given birth. Their proven fertility made them valuable assets for soldiers of lower rank. In the Empire's pragmatic view, they were reliable biological producers, capable of ensuring that every warrior, no matter his status, would leave behind descendants. This was a guarantee of legacy, a way to anchor the Mongol presence for generations to come. But what about those who didn't fit into these carefully defined categories? The elderly, the sick, the injured, or those who resisted their captors with fierce defiance, simply vanished from the official records. Their fate required no documentation because, in the eyes of the Empire, they had no value. They were an obstacle, a drain on resources, and were eliminated quickly and without ceremony. For the women who were selected to remain within this system, the next stage was a complete and total erasure of their former selves. Their original names were forbidden. Instead, they were assigned numbers or code designations based on where they were captured. Sometimes, their skin was permanently marked with tattoos, indicating their classification and the tribe they now belonged to. Their very identity, their connection to their past, family, and culture, was seen as a liability and obstacle the emperor deliberately and systematically destroyed. This terrifying system expanded dramatically during the Mongol invasion of the Jin Empire, which began in 1211. As entire cities collapsed under the relentless Mongol assault, the number of captives swelled to almost unimaginable levels. Contemporary chroniclers describe single sieges where as many as 40,000 women were captured after one city fell. To manage this massive human resource, the Mongols developed a logistical marvel that followed just behind the front lines of the army. From a distance, they looked like moving cities, vast caravans stretching to the horizon, kicking up clouds of dust that could be seen for days. Endless rows of wagons, tents, livestock, and columns of prisoners snaked across the landscape. These were not just simple transport columns. They were mobile centers of biological processing, the engine rooms of the empire's genetic warfare. Here, women were sorted, recorded, and prepared for their new lives as instruments of the Mongol conquest. The core of this strategy was the concept of seeding the world. It was a conscious, deliberate policy to ensure that wherever the Mongol army conquered, their genetic legacy would be planted deep within the local population. The children born from these unions were raised as Mongols. They spoke the language, followed the customs, and, most importantly, were loyal to the empire. The sons of Mongol fathers and conquered mothers often became soldiers themselves, reinforcing the army and helping to expand the empire even further. They were the living embodiment of the conquest, a permanent bridge between the conquerors and the conquered, ensuring that the new order would hold. This wasn't just about military occupation. It was a long-term demographic transformation, a way to make the Mongol presence an undeniable biological fact in the lands they ruled. We can see the echoes of this strategy in the genetic makeup of Asia today. Modern DNA studies have traced a specific Y-chromosome lineage, believed to have originated with Genghis Khan and his close male relatives across a vast swath of the continent. It is found in an astonishingly high percentage of the male population in regions that were once part of the Mongol Empire, from the Pacific coast to the Caspian Sea. An estimated 16 million men today carry this genetic signature. This is not a coincidence. It is the direct, living legacy of that systematic, century-long project. It is a stark reminder that the Mongol Empire's conquests were fought not only with swords and arrows, but with a terrifyingly effective biological weapon. They didn't just conquer lands, they remade populations, rewriting the human map of Asia in a way that endures to this day. The scale and success of this strategy are unparalleled in history, making the Mongol conquests not just a military event, but a profound and permanent genetic one. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into the hidden strategies of the past fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. See you next time. Inside them, reproduction was monitored with careful attention. Mongol healers and physicians recruited from conquered territories experimented with herbs believed to increase fertility. They tracked menstrual cycles and calculated periods most favorable for conception using rudimentary calendars. The logic behind these practices resembled supply chain planning rather than human relationships. Reproduction had become a production line. Capture, classification, physical conditioning, forced motherhood, evaluation of offspring. Women who failed to become pregnant after repeated attempts were reassigned to labor or removed from the system entirely. New captives arriving from recently conquered territories replaced them continuously. Individual identity was considered dangerous within this structure. The more a person remembered who they once were, the harder it became to control them. Therefore, names, languages, and cultural traditions were gradually suppressed. At night, inside the caravans, silence dominated the camps. The sounds of battle had long faded. Instead, there was only the scratching of scribes recording births and deaths by torchlight. Each newborn child was counted like grain stored in a warehouse. Through this mixture of administrative bureaucracy and systematic violence, Genghis Khan's empire began reshaping the demographics of entire regions. Yet even within this overwhelming machinery, resistance emerged. The women held captive realized that their bodies had become the battlefield itself. If they could not fight their captors directly, they could resist the role assigned to them. Some women deliberately starved themselves, weakening their bodies, until pregnancy became impossible. Others secretly shared knowledge of plants capable of inducing miscarriage. These acts were incredibly dangerous. Many women died from poisoning or malnutrition. But for some, death seemed preferable to giving birth to the child of an enemy. Another form of resistance was quieter but equally powerful: memory. In a system designed to erase languages and identities, mothers whispered forbidden words to their children during the night. They sang songs from their homelands so softly that only the infant resting against their chests could hear them. They repeated the child's true name, the one the empire tried to replace. "You're not the number they gave you," they whispered. "You are the child of a city that once stood beneath the sun." These whispered memories became small acts of rebellion against the machinery of conquest. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, the empire he created had already spread across enormous territories. According to some historical accounts, soldiers guarding his funeral procession killed anyone who crossed their path to keep the location of his burial secret. Even in death, the rituals surrounding him reflected the same ruthless logic that defined his rule. But the most important truth was this: the system he created did not die with him. His successors inherited more than land. They inherited his methods. His son, Genghis Khan, expanded campaigns into Eastern Europe, applying the same practices of classification and reproductive control across the steppes of Russia and the plains of Hungary. Later rulers continued spreading Mongol dominance across Persia, Central Asia, and China. What had begun as a brutal innovation on the Mongolian steppe became a bureaucratic institution. The empire's armies conquered cities. But the demographic system ensured something far more permanent. The genetic legacy of the conquerors spread throughout the populations they ruled. Centuries later, the physical evidence of this system would emerge in an unexpected place: modern genetics. Scientists analyzing Y-chromosome patterns across Central Asia discovered a lineage shared by millions of men. Statistical modeling revealed that the pattern spread far too quickly to be explained by normal population growth. It pointed back to a single paternal ancestor who lived roughly 1,000 years ago. Today, researchers estimate that around 16 million men alive on Earth carry this genetic signature. Each of them represents the final link in a chain that began centuries ago, often with a captured woman and a conquering warrior. Empires usually measure their legacy through monuments, borders, or dynasties. But the Mongol Empire left something different behind. Its most enduring monument is not made of stone or bronze. It exists inside human DNA. The story of Saria, the girl standing in the ruins of Khwarazm, was never recorded in official chronicles. Like millions of others, she disappeared into the machinery of conquest. Her name faded into silence. But if she survived long enough to pass on her genes, then somewhere today a descendant may be walking the earth without ever knowing her story. 800 years later, science has begun to reveal what history once tried to bury. And the genetic echo of that empire still lives on in millions of people around the world.